Good morning, America. Thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy. We've got an interesting show today. We're talking about corporate issues, and we're going to continue talking about that next week. But today, something popped up. Lovely IRS put out a warning about offer and compromise mills. So it's in their daily news section. And I think it's really important that people understand what is truthful about what the IRS is saying and what they're doing, what the IRS is doing to make it harder than ever for offer and compromises. So again, it's one of the most sought after resolution. Doesn't work for everybody, but when it works, it's amazing. I like to use the analogy of Cinderella's slipper. If you're one of the stepsisters whose toe is too big or the heel is too fat and it just won't fit, it's not a good match. But for many people, and I've done it's an amazing fit. I've done thousands of them, but we're going to dive into that detail when we come back. Welcome back, everybody, and so we're gonna dive into the offer and compromise as the topic of the day. But first, we're gonna get to the news, and there's some interesting stuff out there. So it's when I talk about civility, that we absolutely need civility. It doesn't matter who you're working with across the aisle or in your job. As a prosecutor, I definitely learned that lesson to respect the other side, to listen to them at times. And there were times there were holes in our case where we were doing the wrong thing and just didn't know it. And especially when people's lives and freedoms are on the line, it's very important to try to get it right. Too often in our society, if we don't get things our way, we don't respect the process. We lose our cool, and especially when the IRS is trying to do a job. Do I sit there and make fun and get frustrated with the IRS? Absolutely. But do I understand that the people on the other side are just trying to do a job? Yes. So that's one of the reasons it irritates me so much when the IRS comes out and just tries to attack people doing offer and compromises. And are there bad actors out there? Absolutely. But we're going to really dive into that. But this is kind of segueing into our main topic for the day. And I'm going to go ahead and share our first article about people doing it the wrong way. And it's pretty scary with a second assassination attempt on Trump. So this just happened yesterday. A Democrat donor arrested for threatening to kill 6 Supreme Court justices, and this is per the DOJ. So they didn't name which Supreme Court justices, but there's 6 conservatives on the court, and this guy is a regular Democrat donor over 82 times. And it's not that he did it once. He sent 465 messages to the Supreme Court, many of them very threatening. So this is a 76-year-old gentleman. He should be living out his retirement. Go to the beach. Enjoy your grandchildren. I'm not saying don't be involved in politics, but if you're spending this much time threatening the Supreme Court, for allegedly threatening to murder 6 U.S. Supreme Court justices, go get a hobby. Do something else. There's joy in this life aside from politics. And so apparently, per the DOJ, escalated message intended to threaten harm towards the victims, contain violent, racist, homophobic rhetoric, threats of assassination by torture, hanging, and firearms. Not okay. By any standard. How in the world they got to 465 messages and threats over time, I don't know. I mean, we've had one gentleman was arrested. I forget which Supreme Court justice. He was ready to go in, duct tape the family, and kill the Supreme Court justice. Have we lost our minds, people? It's just absolutely nuts. So if we're not willing to use the system, we're willing to break the system by violence, threats, or tortures, we're doing it absolutely wrong. And unfortunately, instead of enjoying his retirement, this guy's going to go to prison. He's facing up to 155 years. Probably won't get half of that. But he's 76. He's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. What a shame. So I feel for him, but at the same time, there's consequences for our decisions. And so, next article, very similar. And Oklahoma and others, they're holding teachers accountable. And if you're teaching students, you're being paid by the state, and you are advocating for the assassination of a presidential candidate, you probably shouldn't be teaching. I'm sorry. I don't care which party it is. If you're advocating violence and assassination, it sounds really bad because it is. And again, it can hurt you. If you want to joke around with your friends, that's fine. Make sure you're not taking pictures and putting it on Instagram. That's the next article. And the state superintendent, Ryan Walters, has said they're going to revoke her license. And she made a post praising the shooter who attempted to assassinate former President Trump. Come on, people. 2 people were killed. Others were injured. This is not something to celebrate. Third world countries take out political rivals. The fact that this is happening in the United States is scary. And again, people on both, maybe it's a lip service, but people on both sides of the aisle are saying, look, we shouldn't have this. This shouldn't be a real thing. And it's continuing. This is an interesting, a little bit interesting article. It's not recent. So now they're updating stuff. So this is from September 13th, so just recently, within the last week. And an English teacher might have his teaching license revoked over a 5-year-old Instagram post. If you're a public servant, and even if you're not, what you post on the internet, 1, stays around forever. 2, can land you in some serious hot water. So again, it's be smart, people. Have some tact. You can hate Trump all you want, but if you start talking about assassinating him, and again, this post really aged very poorly when it was taken all the way back in 2019. They were just playing around. Apparently, they were goofing around. When you say goofing around, his daughter put on a mask of Donald Trump. His son held up a silver plastic sword and Kalaki grimace. So they're laughing here. The picture's actually here. That was actually posted right here. So son's got a sword. Apparently he's got a sword too. And they're pretending to stab and hack at President Trump when he was president. Extremely poor taste, especially with your children. I mean, is this what you're going to teach your children? And as an English teacher, I really hope nothing has seeped through to the classroom, very possibly. And this is after the whole bloody head incident with Kathy Griffin. People, let's tone down the rhetoric. And again, rightly or wrongly, I'm not expressing an opinion as to whether or not he should lose his teacher's license and lose his career. It's not like he can't, well, he does have an English degree. But I'm sure there's other things he can do, but we need better role models. We need people, adults acting like adults. I'm sorry. If I did that with, I don't remember her name, but there was a Democrat congressman that was shot actually in Tucson, where I live. If I posted a picture afterwards or praised the shooter, I should be disciplined. I mean, that's not acceptable. Praising assassins? We're not in the Middle East. We're not sponsoring domestic terrorism, which is what this stuff is. It's, and especially doing it with your kids, is in very extremely poor taste and just highlights how much hate is being shared and taught to children. Again, whether or not he should lose his job again is a different issue. I'm not pining on that. I think there's been too many people that have excused bad behavior, that have just chuckled at it, and given the recent assassination attempts, it's deadly serious now. So be careful what you post out there. If you're with your friends, you joke around, ha ha, whatever. I don't ever joke around about assassinations or murders of Democrats or Republicans. It's in poor taste, and again, should be outside of civic, discourse. Should be beyond the bounds, not acceptable. Now, going to economic news, stepping away from that. I mean, it's just seeing those 3 articles today. It's just like, okay, we need some more sanity. And let's talk about what's going on in the world. First of all, we've talked about how China their economy is slumping, and they're actively trying to focus on their own domestic producers to undercut not only U.S. manufacturers, but European. And so Mercedes-Benz has taken a huge hit. Shares fell more than 8% on Friday. They're just the latest example to cut their outlook for 2024. And weaker demand from China is the biggest driver. So a lot of car makers, a lot of American and European large companies really bet big on growing China demand, and it's really getting hit hard. So, and the auto industry is very important to Germany. So the EU is in active negotiations with China. So again, affected overall sales volume in China as a result of this. So we'll see what happens with the EU. And again, there's plenty of articles about the EU tariffs. Getting slapped on Chinese EV makers really trying to undercut their domestic producers. So it's not just in the United States, it's happening in the EU as well. And China's threat to other economies is very real. And even though their own economy is hurting, they're still trying to flood other markets and undercut other auto manufacturers and other industries in general. So very real issue here. So we're almost on our break. Let me check the time. But I'll just introduce this next article. I might even be able to get through it. European Union, again, going after Google, Facebook, social media giants. So because of Facebook, they're facing a hefty fine due to anti-competitive practices. So this is all about controlling the advertising market. If you don't go through Google, you don't go through Facebook, you don't get you don't get a chance to actually compete, or they cut out other advertising agencies. So we'll dive into this deeper when we come back from this next break. Back, everybody. Well, welcome back, everybody. So again, just jumping into this next article, European Union has been very busy going after Google, Facebook, Apple, and hitting them with massive fines for anti-competitive practices, which, again, fighting monopolies and some of the largest tech out there to ensure free markets. I think that is a valid role of the federal government. So I don't applaud the EU very often, but I think this is probably a very good thing. What I do have problems is where they go after them for refusing to censor. So that gets into our next article. But again, they're accusing them of shutting out other advertising companies, using the social networks to undermine and dominate the market. And they'll be coming out with a decision fairly soon. The upcoming fine is going to be the last step here after that decision. And so again, this hasn't been the first time they've been scrutinized. It won't be the last. But DOJ is actually looking at this and going after Google at the same time. It's AT&T years ago was broken up into all the baby bells. I don't think it's going to be that extreme, but I think we might see some massive changes in how Google, Apple, Facebook, some of the biggest tech companies out there have to operate. So moving on to the next article, and I'm going to jump around a little bit. This has to do with, again, another huge company, Elon Musk's X and Starlink in Brazil. So Elon Musk has refused to censor. And so Brazil has been, there's a president, very liberal president, and a top judge that, pretty much doing whatever the president wants, according to Elon Musk. And they're facing, even though they've pulled out, now they're facing daily fines of $1 million a day for evading the ban. So they've been banned from Brazil. And apparently some X users are using a dynamic internet protocol to get around the ban. And they're looking for every way to smack X and prevent them from being accessed at all unless they agree to censor, according to the government. Now, to be fair to Brazil, there are other countries that Elon Musk does censor for. And I'm just kind of scanning for it. But again, the whole idea of censorship is something that should scare Americans. It should scare anybody that believes in freedom of speech and freedom of information. So again, forcing companies to remove hate speech and other harmful content and other content deemed harmful to democratic institutions. This is very, very broad. This is government censorship. And they've refused to agree to this. So other countries, though, in India, Turkey, and Hungary, they have agreed to some censorship. I'm not sure about the details of how far it goes in those countries. So they have agreed to some requests to remove some profiles and posts in some countries. But again, I believe Brazil's is more extreme. And he's essentially put his foot down and said, well, we'll leave the whole country then. If you're going to go after our people, you're going to go after other companies, and they're trying to go after Starlink as well, which apparently is providing the internet access through which people are accessing X. So they're tying the two together and going after Starlink's accounts, which is still operating in Brazil. So before this suspension, they had an estimated 22 million users in Brazil. And again, it's a very large country of over 180 million people, and that could be an old number. So again, that saga is ongoing. And Brazil is not the only country engaging in free speech violations and going after companies that refuse to censor. So it's been rife in American companies for very guilty of doing that in China. And again, it should be concerning to anybody that's a free speech advocate. Probably should have shared this story earlier when I'm talking about the EU and Mercedes-Benz in China. President, and this is from Breitbart, but U.S. senators on both sides of the aisle are warning of China doing exactly what President Trump claimed they were doing. So he threatened a 200% tariff on Chinese auto parts coming from Mexico from Chinese factories. So here, senators on both sides of the aisle are warning that, hey, China may use Mexico to bypass tariffs. And I don't think it's a may, it's like they are already doing it. So you have people from complete opposite sides of the aisle: Marco Rubio, Sherrod Brown from Ohio, Mike Brown from Indiana, and Bob Casey from Pennsylvania. So again, you have this is a bipartisan statement, and saying that we need to do something to address this, because now China has taken advantage of the nearshoring trend and has been moving its factories to Mexico, still funding Chinese products, and that are getting funneled and funded by the Communist the CCP, the Communist Chinese government, and they're using these for unfair competitive practices to undercut the EV industry in the United States and the EU. And so again, they're in violation of a 2019 agreement that was made with President Trump. And so do we protect our American industrial base, or do we just let it get full on assault? So China is being very aggressive. They're being very slippery. They're doing their best to hurt American industries for obvious reasons. They want to supplant us as the number one economic powerhouse in the world, and they're using every trick in the book, so to speak, to do so. So, again, it gets into more detail about it. Again, the surging steel, but I think it's interesting that politicians on both sides are very concerned about it, and this actually supports. When I talked about it the other day, I didn't have enough information. Okay, we're just going to slap tariffs everywhere we go, but apparently this has bipartisan support to actually do something about China's abuses and using Mexico to get around the current tariffs that are already in place. So, last article before we get to our main topic. Federal judge delivers a major blow to Kamala Harris, blocks key campaign promise. Now, this is about student loans, which is, again, started with President Biden, but she's continued that, promising to get rid of student loans. There's a lot of opposition to it, mainly because who ends up paying? So it's all the student loans that are forgiven. The government has to pay back. The taxpayers have to pay back, and so it all comes from states. So we have states suing over this, state attorney generals, and again, the courts have ruled against her. So this is just a temporary pause for 14 days, pending a preliminary injunction if granted. So again, this is a Bush appointee. But it's been fairly consistent. The Supreme Court smacked it down, and pretty much the idea of student loan forgiveness, carte blanche by the government, is there's no authorization from Congress to do this. Again, it's something that President Biden has promised, but didn't have any. He has no authorization to do so, and the courts have been very consistent that no, he can't just decide to do whatever he wants. There are rules and laws. So again, critics are saying this is just a political gimmick to get young voters to vote for Harris. However, stakes are very high. There's about $1.74 trillion in student loans. If half of that gets added to our budget, and you might say our deficit, yeah, we already owe $35 trillion. What's another trillion? Another $35 trillion or another trillion increases what we're already paying in interest. We're already paying $1 trillion a year in interest on the debt. That's just interest. That's no forward progress. That's just keeping our head above water as we borrow $2 trillion a year. So that would be a very hefty blow to add another $1 trillion in a year to our national debt or so. And so, again, the courts have consistently ruled that, not even question the legality, they've smacked it down and said it's not legal, this whole attempt to erase debt. And I imagine we're going to see more of that in the future, as the courts have been very consistent about that. Last article, and this is really what I want to focus on for the rest of the show today, and this is an article from the IRS. So they're warning of mills taking advantage of people with offer and compromise program. Now, I have feelings both ways, and as something, this is something I've done for 15 plus years. I have a pretty good track record of getting the offer in compromise is accepted. And so the IRS comes out and they take a really broad brush approach to this. And so, again, while they're going after Mills and tell people to beware of this, there's some really scary stuff in here. And I'm going to kind of break it down. So what should you take from this? What should you understand? And what really is happening? What is the IRS doing to make it harder than ever to get an offer on compromise accepted? It's harder than ever right now because the IRS is they're doing a lot to make it harder than ever to get an offer accepted, which runs very counter to some of their statements in this program. So again, I think the IRS is being a little bit disingenuous or lying, flat out lying to the American public here with this post. I have no problem saying that because it's something I see day in and day out. I'm very familiar with what's happening on the ground and how the IRS is making it harder than ever for taxpayers to qualify and get their rights represented. So I'm just going to go through this. So they're warning, and they couch these in terms. So beware of promoters claiming their services are necessary to resolve unpaid taxes owed. So there's a lot here, just in this first line. Do you have to hire a tax professional to submit an offer in compromise? No. Should you talk to a tax professional before filing an offer in compromise? I would say it's a good idea. There are people where their cases are straightforward, but understanding the process, what needs to be done before you even submit a case, usually we spend at least 2 to 3 months, if not 9 months to 12 months, preparing a case for an offer in compromise. You have to have all of your tax returns in. You have to be making sufficient estimated tax payments or making sure you're not going to owe for the next year. A lot of it's about correct timing. And if you don't understand that, you're going to have your offer kicked back to you right away. Most offers that are rejected are people that file their own offer. Now, if you can have someone on that's little lady on retirement submit an offer, and historically you could get those accepted fairly easily if you did it right. You prepared it. I had one case where the previous representative messed up the case royally, and it was just one mistake, but he obviously didn't know what he was doing. He went in, submitted a $0 offer for this client. It got rejected. He didn't look at it. He didn't fix it. He didn't provide any customer service. He said, "Oh, I tried." This is someone that really didn't know what they were doing, because when they brought the offer to me, I reviewed it and said, "Oh, he offered $0. The form even says you can't offer $0. So it even says there, right there, you can't offer $0. I wrote in $20. Well, I reprinted it, verified the information was accurate and all that. It wasn't just writing in a number. But we submitted the offer and it was accepted. So making sure you have someone that knows what they're doing is very key. And we get them submitted for as low as $20 on a regular basis. One of the biggest cases a year or two ago, we got one. It was $245,000, I think, settled for $20. If you qualify, it's like Cinderella's slipper. It's amazing. It's great. But you have to qualify for it. So continue to go through this. Unscrupulous mills use aggressive marketing to make false claims of guaranteed settlements. Anybody that says guaranteed, promises this is going to happen, run for the hills. Even when I am very certain, I never give a guarantee. I tell you, in my personal, professional experience, this has a very high probability of succeeding, but there's always something that could happen. Someone could get an inheritance in the middle of the offer, have that happen, and still we were able to save the offer, but someone's got a better job, they got a raise, all of a sudden their numbers don't match. Life happens. Sometimes you getting a raise is a good thing, but if you start making a lot more money, you might not qualify anymore. So that's, again, I have a case right now. That's exactly what happened. So good for my client, they got a raise. Bad for their offer because now they're making $500 or $1,000 more every single month. Facts have changed. So before someone tells you you qualify for an offer on compromise, they need to do a thorough analysis, and that's something they don't mention at all here. Make sure someone goes through your income, your assets, and your expenses. They have to get all that information before they can tell you, yes, you're a candidate, a good candidate or not. And I recommend, if you're talking to just a salesperson, make sure they know what they're doing. If you have questions, you should be able to talk to an attorney. You should be able to, or an enrolled agent, someone that actually works these cases and understands them, especially if you have a more complicated case. So can you save pennies on the dollar? Yes, they hate that phrase. But can you save pennies on the dollar? Absolutely. But one of the things, this is key here. If anybody's getting a guarantee or there's a limited window of time to resolve tax debts, I see that regularly on advertisements from marketing companies, and that is there's no time limit on when you can file an offer on compromise. The only time limit is if the debt expires and goes away, or you change in your circumstances. But there's no time limit on when, or window of time as to when you can file an offer in compromise. So if people are guaranteeing something or saying you have to do it now, again, be very aware. Those are huge red flags. So if they're being very aggressive, if you get into a high pressure sales situation, a lot of companies will try to get people just on board, just pay us something, we'll get started. And if anybody's giving you guarantees, we know we can do this, but they haven't looked at your finances. And legally, as attorneys, we can't give guarantees. And if it's an enrolled agent, I don't care how many years they've been with the IRS, if they're giving a guarantee, run for the hills. Steep fees, you know what? IRS complains about steep fees. The IRS has made it harder than ever. And I'll get into that. First of all, when you submit your offer, and I'm coming up on a break, so I'm going to have to get into this after this next break. So much to cover here. Welcome back, everybody. As you can tell, this kind of gets my blood flowing here talking about this. But I was just about to talk about how the IRS has made it harder than ever. When you submit your offer in compromise, if you don't have all the tax returns filed, or if you don't have a filing requirement, they will reject. They'll send a rejection letter saying you need to file these years, you need to pay estimated tax payments, you need to. Again, you didn't complete the forms correctly. They're going to reject it to you within a month, very quickly. And many times we see them rejecting offers, demanding that people file returns they don't have to file, or demanding that they pay estimated tax payments when they're retired and they don't have any estimated tax payments. So they will reject them and force people to respond within a very tight window. And it looks like their offer is done. It looks like it's rejected. So if you are not a professional, how are you going to know that this is just the first shot from the IRS to reject your offer? And really, it's turned into this gotcha game with the IRS where they're trying to reject your offer at every step of the way, even legitimate offers that should be easily accepted. Now, again, there are plenty of good people there that work there. I blame the administration, I blame the IRS further up, and I blame the training. They're training a lot of new offer specialists is what they're calling now. But again, we've gotten some really dumb stuff from them, whereas they used to be much better trained. And don't get me wrong, there's still plenty of good people there, but they've been trained, and their programs are forcing them to be tougher than ever, and pushing back, not giving people credit for exemptions, things that you're entitled to. So they won't even, they'll send you a chart and saying, well, you have to pay this, this, and this is all the equity we're looking at. But it's bad information. Because if they accept the offer, all of a sudden you get exemptions. So while you might think that you're very far from an accepted offer, you might be very close to an offer, because they'll consider equity in vehicles. They won't give an exemption for what's in your bank account, other things. They just won't give you credit for it until they accept the offer, and they say, look, okay, this looks like an offer that needs to be accepted. They miss those exemptions on a regular basis as well, and we've had to fight and appeal offer and compromises more than ever, because the IRS looks to reject them, and a lot of it's through bad service. I have one case right now. We have been calling them. Our power of attorney's on file. We called them on September 3rd. I called them on the 13th, and then I just called them again on the 19th to follow up on the case. And the client just got a letter on the 19th, yesterday, that was mailed around the 3rd, dated the 13th, gave him 10 days to respond, and we're getting this letter. We didn't get the letter as a power of attorney. We've been blowing up their phones. It's not enough to just blow up their phones. We've faxed them as well, and I've had them tell me absolutely ridiculous stuff, saying, look, we don't accept faxes anymore. You need to mail us a letter with the 10-day turnaround. And we're getting these letters late anyway. So we're seeing offers rejected on technicalities, where, again, the IRS never looks at the actual facts of the case. And it's happening more and more, where we have to aggressively fight the case the whole way through. Not only with the offer specialists, but when they make horrible decisions or things that's just ridiculous, we have to appeal those. We're taking more cases to appeal than ever. And it adds another 5 months. And again, you have to know the process, how to appeal it, what's going to be considered an appeal. And they tell you wait for the hearing. You can't wait for the hearing and appeal. They've made the process so much harder. And so this is why their statements, as we're going to get to them, really are disingenuous. So deceitful and lying. They're lies. So the way the IRS has taken it is they've made it harder than ever to get offers accepted with a tax professional, and it's so much harder for taxpayers trying to navigate this landmine that the IRS, didn't used to be this way. 4 years ago, before this current administration, it wasn't like this. So they say the result is often good money paid for bad results. Well, yeah, the results are tougher and harder than ever because of what the IRS has done. So it requires more time, more effort to go through the offer process. So again, when you have false assurances, you got to be very understanding. Like, look, this is harder than ever. The IRS is purposefully doing this, and we're fighting them because it shouldn't be like this. It hasn't been like this. Again, that they've taken the offer and compromise program 20 years backwards. So it is a legitimate IRS program. You can settle a debt for less than the full amount owed, for much, much less. Again, I've known people that have done $10 offers. It is a possible option. So if someone's telling everybody that walks in the door, hey, you can do an offer and compromise, be very aware of that, unless they go through your financials, and there's usually pros and cons. Here's some possible issues. They have to dig fairly deeply into your financial analysis. It can be done within an hour or so, 30 minutes to an hour. But if someone's telling you without asking all kinds of questions and digging into your information that they think you're qualified, they don't know what they're talking about. So the OIC agreement occurs directly between the taxpayer and the IRS, which is true. But what it insinuates is that taxpayers don't need representation. And that's actually a violation. The IRS is trying to tell people that they don't need a representation when they themselves have made the process harder than ever. So, and we're going to get to that down in one of these other paragraphs. And they kind of repeat themselves a lot. It's a valuable program, which it is. Some companies offer legitimate services to help taxpayers file a request. In my opinion, today, it's harder than ever to do an offer and compromise. Do you have to have a tax professional? No. There are people that file their own and do get them accepted. They're the exception. They're absolutely the exception. If you don't know how they run, how to stay on top of the IRS, and if you just don't have the time to stay on top and hound the IRS and stay on top of your offer until it's finally accepted, then consider a tax professional. Excessive fees, it's potato. We tend to charge about half of some of the bigger companies out there. I'm not going to name names, but if someone's charging you based on a percentage of what they think they're going to save you, be very aware of that, especially if they're having you pay up front. If you don't know what the final cost is going to be aware of that. Now, there are larger firms that bill hourly, and you're not going to know because it's based on the amount of time. But you should have very, very high balances to warrant those kind of fees. And they can be much higher than other companies that charge flat fees. A flat fee really helps you understand from the start how much is going to be the cost and how to pay it. And they should be legitimate flat fees where there's no additional costs added on. One thing that our firm does that makes it stand out is that if for some reason the offer and compromise doesn't work, we always set up some kind of resolution. Either we'll go to a non-collectible status or an installment agreement. And if it legitimately isn't going to work, we'll go to a fallback resolution. But if it gets rejected because the IRS is being stupid, which happens a lot, we'll resubmit it. We will appeal, we'll fight it through until we get a legitimate answer from the IRS. And that's based on the facts. So there are companies out there that charge excessive fees, but you got to understand and be aware that when someone gives you an idea, how long is it going to take? At least 9 months. You have to get in there, get the paperwork together. You have to verify that the IRS, that your tax account is ready to submit an offer and compromise, and then from there it takes 5 to 6 months for someone to be assigned to your case and to actually work the case. And that 9 months right now is a very short time period. In actuality, what tends to happen is that we're appealing most of our offers. And when we appeal, it adds another 6 months to the case at least. So again, your 9 months just went to 15 months. And if you have to file tax returns, if you have to get other things in place, it can easily add another 6 months for there, as IRS is taking 6 months to process older returns. So really, I would say it's taking 12 months to a year to do an offer and compromise. So if you're hiring a professional for 2 years to work a case, expect to pay a decent amount of money. If someone's charging you $1,000 to $2,000, unless they're doing it pro bono or it's a reduced fee rate, it's probably not enough. So if someone's charging you $10,000, $20,000 and you don't owe millions of dollars, you're probably being overcharged. So again, the best way to counter that is Shop around. So this is one of the biggest lies that the IRS has. And again, I'm calling it out because it's egregious. It's ridiculous that the government would tell you this, and it's a violation of your rights. The IRS can help taxpayers pursue the program on their own. No, they don't. Taxpayer Advocate is the best assistant that they have, and they don't touch offers. The IRS does not help taxpayers pursue the offer and compromise program. Collections doesn't even know how it works. I talk to people in collections, I talk to revenue officers, and a lot of them will say if things become difficult, someone's in a difficult situation, they'll say, oh, well, you can consider the offer and compromise program. It's a great way to get someone off their back, get out of an uncomfortable conversation instead of dealing with the hard truth. And I've seen them recommend that people go file an offer on their own or file an offer and compromise when they don't qualify. And I've had to correct revenue officers or other people and say, look, why are you suggesting an offer and compromise? This is why they don't qualify. A, B, C. Why would you even bring that up? And they said, oh, well, I really don't know. I'm like, I know you don't know. And without the help of these unscrupulous OIC Mills, in the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, you have a right to representation. This is a violation of that. Telling taxpayers you don't need a higher representation. To navigate the offer and compromise program more than ever, I would suggest at least talking to someone. And they recommend this offer and compromise pre-qualifier tool. It gives false positives and it ignores adjustments that you can make to help you qualify. I've had taxpayers go to other firms, be told multiple times they don't qualify, even use the offer and compromise pre-qualifier tool. Come to me, we did a thorough review and actually qualified for them. So the offer and compromise pre-qualifier tool might give you an idea if you qualify, but it doesn't help you issue spot, it doesn't help you address that. We will sit down, go through your situation, highlight what issues you might have with an offer and compromise, and discuss, can we deal with those? Does it make sense to deal with those issues or address these issues? Or does it make sense to pursue another option? So again, I trust the IRS as far as I can throw them. And I would be very, very cautious whenever the IRS is telling you you don't need representation. So they couch this as the language, you don't need these unscrupulous OIC Mills. There are good people pretty much everywhere. I cut my teeth in one of these larger companies that was deemed a mill. I did over 300 successful offers in 1 year. That's almost one a day. They had good training. We had a great system. If it was used correctly, we did a lot of good. We helped a lot of taxpayers. And again, I use that same knowledge today to help taxpayers day in and day out. So again, this is why it really torques my turkey. You could say that again, their IRS does not respect the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. There are taxpayer advocate has tried to call them out on this. Some of their posts here really going after saying that you can do this on your own. You don't need representation. While at the same time, the IRS is making it harder than ever, is very disingenuous in my opinion, and deceitful. So again, it really gets me keyed up. Are there other options? Yes. Should you go over your options? If someone's just talking about an offer and compromise and they don't talk about other options, they're not helping you. You should know what your other options are aside from an offer and compromise. There's times I think someone's a great offer candidate and they decide to go somewhere else. So clear takeaways here is get multiple opinions. Make sure they go through your financial information before they recommend anything. Unless you have plenty of money and just want to pay it off with an installment agreement or something. So get informed and get your case taken care of. Again, that's all for today. Have a great day and we'll see you next week.